I'm Eric Silverthorn. My call's NM5M. So I will confess I am a contester. And I've been for 48 years. Got my first call sign when I had just turned 13. And so I want to share a little bit about not only contesting in general for those who haven't been involved in that part of the hobby, but in CW, and also some services that are out there that will allow you, if you want, to learn CW. A common misconception is CW's dead, that you don't need it anymore in order to get your license. I think that was actually one of the best things that happened in the hobby when they decided that you didn't have to know CW to be a ham. But having said that, there are more CW operators globally now than ever before. And the proof of that is that the contest scores in CW continue to rise. They continue to rise year after year, even in years when there's poor propagation. If you compare those same periods of the solar cycle to the previous generation, those numbers are still higher. A misconception about contesting is that you have to have a big station in order to participate. I'm going to talk a little bit about why that's not true. And then a pet peeve and something I wanted to mention is there's also a common thought that CW operators use decoders. And I would say in the top 200 or 300 stations in contests that are operating, not a single one of them is using a decoder. They learn, you train yourself and you learn how to decode, with your ears and your head. And all of those people are copying in their head. It's going straight from their head to the fingertips. They're typing this stuff into their logging software. We'll talk about logging software and stuff as well. I'll learn how to drive this. So further proof about the notion that CW is dead. So this year, or in 2023, there were around 1.2 million QSOs made during field day, which is amazing, right? That's again, people talk about the hobby dying or the hobby slowing down or anything else, but of that, 479,000 CW contacts, about the same number of sideband contacts, 300,000 FT8 contacts, and of course FT8's not been around very long. Imagine the boost in operating activity and scores that the digital guys are able to provide. Also, the digital guys, much like CW, you get double points for those contacts. And so over the years, I've been recruited. I was first recruited to participate in a field day when I was 14 years old, when I was a novice. In those days, at field day, novice operators, much like the GOTA station, it was free points. And so I got a phone call from a guy, I grew up in Houston, and he says, hey, you want to join our field day? We do a big field day and so forth. Well, they did do a big field day. So the novice station had a tri-band Yagi and a 2-element 40-meter beam just at the novice station. They put that together. We made, another novice and we made 800 contacts that weekend on CW. And those were double points, and it was free. It didn't count as a transmitter. And so the good thing, I was invited to come back the next year, and it's a lot of fun. So what are folks doing to learn CW these days? So I'm an instructor in an organization called CW Academy. It's sponsored by CW Ops. They offer training in a semester system. And so within their program, they have a curriculum that's built with the courses lasting 8 weeks, generally 2 sessions a week, and usually there's about 4 or 5, 6 people in a class, and they have an 80% success rate in the first level. And in my class, in the first level, a requirement is by the time we're done with the course, you have to get on the air and make a contact. Whether you come to my house and make a contact, or however we figure out how you do that, but you have to get on the air and make contact. And a lot of people will argue and they say, well, people really aren't ready for that. So Bob, you were in my class, right? And I want to pause for a second. Has anybody else gone through CW Academy in here? So,
Yeah,
the organization, that part of CW Ops, CW Academy, consists of 4 levels of training. So the first level really is to teach you all the letters, punctuation, and numbers. It's 40 characters. The class is based around 40 characters. And there's some things called prosigns that are added in there, which are kind of abbreviations that Morse operators use. And it's a throwback, actually, some of them from the railroad days. And so, the CW Academy generally has about 700 students a semester participating in the program. They have about 90 volunteer instructors in the program. And so you go online, you sign up, they pair you with a class depending upon your schedule, and then after 8 weeks, if you pass, you move forward, and you can repeat as many times as you want. Best part is it's free. All this is free. And so Long Island CW is also a very good program. They're a little bit different in that it's a carousel. So the classes don't really have a start and finish. You jump in and you learn, and the instructor has some curriculum and so forth, and you follow along until you get around in the carousel, you've learned all the letters, and you can move on to the other class. An interesting thing about Long Island CW is they must have about 60 online programs a week of all different things, not just learning CW, but building antennas, getting on the air, how to use a bug, how to get better at sending, how to pick a keyer, how to use an iambic keyer, all of these kinds of things. And so my point of sharing this with you is, if you don't know CW and you have a curiosity about it, there are actually a lot of very easy ways to do it and also not do it alone. And in tandem with that thought, I would offer to teach a MetroCrest class just of people here. We could start around the first of the year. And so I have a pad up front with the pen. If anybody wants to sign up, just give me your name and email address and so forth, indicate an interest in wanting to do that, and then I can start sharing materials with you, and we can get ready to go. There is a fraternal aspect to CW operating because of its rich history in the hobby. Of course, when ham radio really got started in the early 1900s, it was all Morse based. It wasn't CW yet because they were doing Spark. They couldn't call it CW until they figured out how to build oscillators with vacuum tubes. But before, guys are just creating lightning through wires, and that's how they're communicating. Of course, you can learn how to do this on your own, and a lot of people do. I think what I've noticed in group learning is a benefit is everybody has the same frustrations while they're learning. They also have the same trip points, the same hurdles, the same regression. I can tell you exactly when you're going to have regression in the class. And then as you come out of the tunnel, you can also predict that success pretty easily, especially, I mean, I've been teaching for 7 or 8 years in the CW Academy. There's some free apps, Learn CW Online, LCWO. There's a bazillion Learning CW apps on the App Store or Google Play. So like I mentioned, CW Academy is free. They do it in 3 semesters, fall, winter, and spring. The class that I teach would be the beginner class, and then I would prepare you for the second level, which I generally don't teach. I have before. I taught the second level for the guys in the Lake Area Radio Club. They must have a dozen CW guys in that club now or more from all of that. And that started, I don't know, 6 years ago or something like that. It's really taken off. And they're very active in CW events, the Lake Amateur Radio Club, the guys up in the colony. Long Island CW, they charge $30 a year. CW Academy, well, they have 700 700 students a semester. The last time I checked, it was before COVID. They had graduated more than 15,000 people from their program. And Long Island CW is $30 a year. And then the other tools, Learning CW online, LCWO is free, I believe. Morse Mania may be a couple of bucks to download. And so, continuing on the discussion of, you have to have a big station to be in contesting. I'll tell you a little bit about why that's not the case. And also too, so I live in an HOA. I have hidden antennas and so forth. I'm never the loudest guy, but I can still get on and I can have fun in these contests with hidden antennas. I have one antenna that's hidden in my neighbor's magnolia tree that's grown over the fence line. He just found out about it. He had to replace, his dog broke through the fence, and he had to replace a couple of pickets on the fence, boards on the fence. And he was pretty curious about what I had going on in his magnolia tree, but he was good. Indoor antennas, a lot of folks have some success using indoor antennas. I actually have one antenna that I use on 80 meters, and it lays on the roof of my house. It lays on the shingles of my house. And everyone will tell you the physics, and I don't disagree with the physics of why you shouldn't do that, but it works just fine, except I had to change burglar alarm systems because I kept setting off the burglar alarm. But a lot of guys will have vertical antennas, multi-band vertical antennas. This was pretty ingenious. N5TIT was living in an apartment. This is on his balcony, and he's got a ham stick, and then he wrapped a coil for the radial on the bottom. He also got brave and went on the roof. He put up about a 200-foot wire on top of the apartment building, and that lasted a couple of weeks until someone got wise to it. You guys, I know a bunch of you go to the parks and operate the 30-foot telescoping poles. It's genius, going out and getting a fishing pole and putting an antenna up. It's inexpensive, and it gives you a lot of choices of things you can do, whether you're putting up a 40-meter antenna or 20-meter antenna that with an elevated feed point. Ham stick in the attic. It just has to radiate. And in a few slides, I'm going to show you why. You just need even the smallest amount of signal to be heard by some of these folks. This is a fan dipole. Ron I think he had a fan dipole out at Field Day this year. And, they work well, and they're pretty easy to hide. I'm a big fan of quarter wave antennas, resonant antennas. I realize that non-resonant antennas can be very efficient in radiation as well, but at the end of the day, we only can do with what we have. And so you just get on the air with whatever it is that you have.
Hey, Eric.
Yeah.
That attic kind of looks like Tom Yenny's attic. He's got radios and antennas all stuffed in his attic.
So I have Yagis in my attic now from 2 meters. I have 2 meters, 222, 902, 1296, and 3456 in my attic. And my best contact, so I have a dipole in my attic. I worked a guy in Argentina on 6 meters once with my dipole antenna. I worked 2 Alaskan stations one afternoon and Galapagos Islands, and those 3 were with 5 watts. I was only running 5 watts, but it's 6 meters. It's the magic band. AA5TB, you guys may have come across his site. He's a expert in loop antennas, in mag loop antennas. And this one's a transmit mag loop that he put together. He's a genius. He's a electronic countermeasures guy at the airplane plant in Fort Worth, Lockheed Martin. And we actually went to school together. I have a QSL card from him when we were 14 in Houston, working each other with vacuum tube radios and all that kind of stuff. But this one's a transmit loop that he put together, and he made the capacitor out of coax. And that way he can run some power. It can be very difficult to run more than a few watts of power on these loop antennas with small capacitors. So he just made his own capacitor out of coax, and it's dangling from the top. Another guy, this is a Denton County guy, AC5T. He's a pretty good builder. He wound those coils in his garage. They looked like he bought them from B&W, but he put a multi-band vertical in his backyard. But this is why you're heard. So this is a contest station near Austin, and you can just take a look at these antennas. Like the two-element antenna in the middle, that's a 2-element 40-meter beam. On the top, he's got a tribander, and that tower's 120 feet tall. And top tribander and the lower, there's a tribander down here. Those two are phased together, so it really compresses the angle of radiation. So you get these guys out there with all this aluminum in the air. And what they enjoy in the hobby is a little bit different from what the small guys work. But if you ever tune in the band, and you hear a European station, and he is just ungodly loud. Well, this is why. This is a German club station, and they have a bunch of 100-foot towers and big antennas. The antennas, we say they have antennas that cast shadows and tubes with handles. And so they're running some power. So interestingly, internationally, unlike the FCC, there are some countries that grant permission to run more power than 1,500 watts. And then there's also people in various countries that run more power than they're supposed to anyway. And so I don't think that these guys are necessarily cheating, but they have great antennas that can hear a pin drop. So if you may think, oh, no one's going to hear me, especially now with the solar flux so high, we're really up. I don't even know if we're at a peak yet in the sunspot cycle, but we're seeing sunspot activity that we haven't seen in this country in 30 years. So this one's in. These guys are always loud. 403A. You'll hear them on 10 meters hours after the rest of Europeans have closed. Yeah. And they just have outstanding signal. They run power. These guys are alligators. They can, big mouth, little ears. They can't. This is a station near Hempstead, Texas. And I've operated from here a number of times. These towers are all 199 feet tall. And he stays below 200 because he doesn't want to put lights on them. I think now he has 8 of those towers. He has 2 towers with 2-element 80-meter beams on them. And I got to operate from the station once. It was about 10 or more years ago. And the night before, I'd been on at home with my wire laying on the roof. And I was on 80 meters, and I heard this European guy. And I call him. And he couldn't get my call, just over and over. He couldn't get my call, and so forth. And then finally, after 5 minutes or so, he got my call sign. Well, the next night I was at NR5M, and I was running a kilowatt into a 2 elements at 199 feet. And he sent me a message. He said, "Eric, you're not at home tonight, are you?" So this is a big station in Moscow, and this is an 80-meter quad. Or 80-meter wire beam, and this is before the ice storm and after the ice storm. And they say it's not big enough if it stays up, on these systems. This is a big station down in Colombia, and the nice thing about these guys with the big stations, a lot of times they'll invite you to come. If you express any interest in going and operating from any of these big stations, or just going and hanging around, you send these station owners a note, and they welcome you with open arms. And more of them are accessible by remote. So you can access them, whether it's sideband or CW or the digital contest. You can do remote desktop. I've always wanted to do 80 meters from the East Coast. And the Europeans are so loud from the East Coast, it's crazy. This station that I wanted to operate from had an antenna called a 4-square. So it's 4 vertical antennas on 80 meters. So they were, I guess the antenna height's about 65 feet or something like that. There's 4 of them. And then they have, each antenna had 120 radials under it. And it's on a mountain in New Hampshire, and yeah, good times. So I got on last year on 80 meters in the CW contest, the DXCW contest. I made like 950 contacts, almost all of them to Europe. And they kept saying, we kept waiting for you to get out of your chair, like get up and have someone else. I'm like, no, I was really having a good time. I've never experienced this before. And this was a station here in the Dallas area. This guy was in Rockwall. Maybe some of you have been around long enough to remember the name AGL Electronics. Alan for sure is. He's an old guy. And so his name was Gordon Fogg. He had a ham store in Dallas for a number of years. And he had 23 towers up in Rockwall. And the towers just came down in the last couple of years. You can see the house in the middle. And they pretty much just put a tower down without a lot of engineering. Wherever the earth was soft, they dug a tower base and put a tower up. And this first tower here, that's 200 feet of Roan 25G. And it had a 2-element 40-meter beam on top of it. Most of the other towers were somewhere around 120 feet or so. But they did something very unique. And so you can see on a couple of these antennas, like in here, and you hear of people doing stacks, vertical stacks. Well, they did horizontal stacks. And the reason they pointed these horizontal stacks to Japan. At the time, in the 80s, late 70s and 80s, there were a lot of hams in Japan, a lot more than there are now. And the idea was they put the lobe right on Japan. And so it nulled out the guys in California and the guys up north, so you didn't hear all the splatter and stuff on sideband. But the J's, which it was just like a piece of string with a cup on each end. It was just perfect copy for those guys. And I got to operate a few times out of there. I was in college and I had left Texas for a few years. I came back and got to operate there a little bit more. They ended up taking their station down piece by piece and moving a lot of it to Antigua. And so they had built a station in Antigua.
Saw you blinking.
You did?
So what do you need to get started? Of course, you need radio and antennas, some logging software, and we're getting ready to talk about that. The nice thing about the logging software, like so many things these days, there's some free stuff that's really good. But N1MM has a pretty steep learning curve. And at N3FJP, they've intentionally kept it simple. So it's good, it's $50, and it's worth it. And he supports all the contests. He supports everything. Great guy. If a new contest comes out, he brings that software up to date and so forth. I happen to like N1MM. And one of the reasons is I've been using it such a long time. It was pretty simple software when it first came out. So I've been able to digest the additions, the upgrades, and so forth a little bit at a time. But I know it's daunting for the first time if you're trying to set it up. WinTest it's supported, or it's made by some French programmers. And I've worked with the French before. Maybe some of you have worked with the French before. So it's okay unless you have to contact them for a problem. And so I had a hard time actually onboarding, getting it to run. I'm in the software business, and so now that also might be the reason I couldn't get it to onboard. But I sent them a note, and they sent me, basically they said read the manual, and I sent him another question, and he wrote me back and he said, some people are not meant to use our software. That's what he told me. And if I hadn't worked with French people before, it would have made me mad. It just made me laugh. And I got it going. It's still around. It's now supported mostly by a guy here in the United States. But the N3FJP stuff, I saw some heads nod here. Folks who are familiar with it. It's really good stuff if you're getting going in any kind of contesting. I'm kind of off the CW part of it for a little while. Whatever, we're coming into contest season right now, so there's some really good ones that are coming up. And here's an example of it's a simple station. Everything on the table is pretty expensive. It's a K3 and a P3, so he's probably got about $3,000 with a radio sitting there, and then he's got his Mac. But this is I don't know if you guys know him, K5ND, who lives in Coppell. This is AA5 TB station. He's got a small Yaesu transceiver, and it's got wire and vertical antennas in the backyard, that loop you saw. So you also don't need tons of stuff, but this is a big radio station. And I'm the third one there. There's another fellow who's been coming to some of your meetings online. He may be online now, W5OV, Bob Nauman. He's a very astute, very accomplished contester. And he's sitting next to the guy with the orange hat. And so each one of those amplifiers are legal limit. They're more than legal limit, but we use them as legal limit. But this picture was taken at sunset, and every band was open at once. And the station is set up so that there's 2 operators per band. So there's one guy calling CQ, and there's another guy tuning around for people that they haven't worked already, or for multipliers. And so in doing that, you can maximize the number of contacts. So it's not unusual in this station to have DXCC on 5 bands in one weekend, and each band having DXCC. And on 40 meters, for instance, 40 and 20 meters and 15 meters, they'll have like 140 countries on each of those bands in a weekend. It's another level, but it's fun. It's actually fun when you're on. It's kind of like getting to do a couple of laps on an Indy car or something like that, that you get to experience. You get to experience the limits of propagation against the extensive hardware that you put up in order to accomplish that. So this station is just outside of Houston. It's near College Station in Hempstead, and it was very active until about 4 years ago, just before COVID. And they're now doing a bunch of rebuild work, and they're actually using that WinTest, the French software. That's what's on all of those screens.
Is that why my parents can't put TV outside?
Oh, of course. I never knew how obnoxious I was as a kid to our neighbors until I became an adult, especially when I got married, because the neighbors, they'd meet my wife or soon-to-be wife, and they would say, "Does he still do that ham radio stuff? Because he used to destroy our televisions all the time." And my parents evidently ran pretty good interference for me for years. I had no idea. Well, except for once. So when I was a kid, I didn't think that it would. I thought if I wanted to put up an antenna, I should just be able to put up an antenna. And so I got up on my parents' roof and I put this wire up, and I decided, man, it'd be twice as long if I go on the neighbor's roof and stretch it across the neighbor's roof. And I didn't think twice about it. And I was using that antenna for about a month, and it worked. And the neighbor, who's good friends of my parents, he came over and he says, "Next time you want to do that, ask me first." And the mind of a 14-year-old sometimes is a little clouded. So I couldn't spell logging correctly here, but dyslexia is okay. Or KO. So these are examples of the screens, and so this top screen is N1MM. This one is N3FJP, and this bottom one is WriteLog, which is another paid software. It's also very popular, but the learning curve is pretty steep on that. But starting out with either N1MM or N3FJP, I would say you'd have a lot of fun. You'd have a lot of fun and a lot of success. So personal goals are a big deal in contests, especially if you're using a small station. Maybe you say, I want to work 100 guys this weekend. Last weekend was the California QSO party. There was a ton of activity, and Bob is shooting fish in a barrel there, and
that was so easy. It was, they were just coming at you.
There's so much activity, very well planned. A lot of counties on the air, and they're close enough. They're close enough and far enough that they come in really well into Texas, and so there's a lot of opportunities to work a bunch of guys. They have these things called multipliers. So multipliers could be states, different states in the United States. It could be different zones in the world. The world, in some contests, are broken into 40 zones, or DXCC countries. Sometimes it's zones and countries, or the multipliers. And the multiplier means that it takes the number of contacts that you have and it multiplies it by whatever that number is. So if you work 1,000 guys, but you just work only 1,000 guys in the state of Texas, well, you'd have 1,000 points. If you worked 45 of the states, your score would be 45,000. And in each contest, they have rules and different points, different point calculations, and so forth. But the other thing too is, how many times have you tuned around on 10 meters, let's say, in the middle of the night or late at night, and just out of nowhere, you don't expect to hear anybody, but then boom, you hear someone, especially in like Australia or New Zealand, South Pacific, maybe French Caledonia, an exotic place. You hear these guys. When everybody is getting on at once, you have a much better chance because of the activity of finding guys to get in the log, whether you're chasing countries, maybe you're working on trying to get your DXCC. So contests can be really helpful if you're chasing that kind of wallpaper, or if you're just trying to see how far your station will reach. Going back to the premise of a lot of these guys have big stations, and they're good operators, they'll pull you out. They'll pull you out of the noise. They have an incentive to do that because they're trying to get as many points as they possibly can. There's lots of different contests: sideband, CW, RIDI, FT8. Normally you don't hear a lot of RIDI activity, but the RIDI activity contests generate tremendous amounts of activity. And all you guys that have your FT8 stuff set up, you can do RIDI with that same, with the same interfaces. You just click different buttons on different software in order to do it. The DX contest, the big ones, CQ Worldwide, that's what CQWW is. It used to be sponsored by CQ Magazine, now they're gone, but there's another organization that's taken over the administration of that. The ARRL has the ARRL DX contest, and there's one in the summertime called IARU, which is International Amateur Radio Union. It's managed by the ARRL people, but it's particularly active amongst the DX stations, the foreign stations, so there's a lot of guys to talk to with that. And the domestic contest, well, field day, and how many people think field day is a contest? See, that's an interesting thing. I do a talk, by the way, on field day. Is it a contest or is it an ice cream social? And if you do it right, it's both, right? If you do it right, it's both. But they keep score. They keep score in field day, and when they report the results, they put the high scores on the top and the low scores on the bottom. So to the contest guys, that's a high five. They love it. The guys that think it's ice cream social, they don't care because it doesn't talk about how much ice cream anybody ate. Sweepstakes is another one that's a historic contest that was patterned after traffic handling in the 1930s. But it's coming up. It's in November. First weekend in November, CW. Third weekend in November is sideband. The North American QSO Party is also, it's really popular. It lasts 12 hours, but there are guys who will make over 2,000 contacts in 12 hours, in the 12-hour period in that contest. VHF, there's a bunch of VHF and UHF contests, and the thing with if you like FT8, it's a guaranteed contact generator for the FT8 guys, because all these guys get on with the FT8. Maybe you have a minuscule opening, but you can get on and you can work guys. I was talking to a friend of mine today he just got DXCC on 6 meters this week with limited antennas. There's a DXpedition off the coast of Brazil, PX0FF is the call sign, and he was able to get them on FT8. And he has a loop antenna. That's all he uses on one of those horizontal loops. And guess what? It helps when everybody's on the air. Like field day weekend, there's more people on the air in the United States field day weekend than any other weekend of the year. All these hams get out. And they talk about, so for a long time, people were discouraged to operate from home. And so when COVID happened, they started to allow people not only, you could do it from home, but you couldn't work each other. So the D class stations couldn't work each other for points. Well, they changed that. Now the D guys can, but this year there was a reversal in the trend of people operating from home. People are getting back into their clubs. They're feeling more comfortable getting out in public, and so the clubs are really thriving again with field day around the country. There were more than 3,500 clubs that operated field day in the United States this year. And my gosh, within a square mile, there were 2 clubs operating field day between you guys and the Dallas guys. I think my ear's still ringing from working the Dallas guy on 40 meters. He was. So this is, throughout the year, you have some contests that are summer contests. Summer is actually really fun operating on HF because DX conditions can be really unpredictable. Like this year, 15 meters was open all night long to Europe. And it didn't take a huge antenna to be able to do it. But right now we're about here, and in the contest calendar, and it's just getting ready to kick off. So a big one coming up that you can have a lot of fun with this year is the 10-meter contest. That's in the beginning of December. For the masochists who like listening to a lot of noise, the 160 contest is the second weekend. I think I have that reversed. First weekend of December is 160 contest. Second weekend is 10-meter contest. And then there's a big RIDI contest, ARRL RIDI contest, first weekend of the new year. ARRL DX contest comes in February and again in March, and so forth. And so there's lots of activity on the weekends. And if you don't like contests, some of you probably don't. And there are times that I'm not just a contester, I like to yik-yak on CW. I like to rag chew with folks on CW. And so I escaped to the WARC bands. And so you can go to 30 meters or 12 meters or 17 meters. There's no contest activities that are allowed on those bands. And actually the activity is higher because all the guys who hate contests get on there. And so there's a bazillion categories. You can do it by yourself. You can do it with, I said packet assistance, that shows my gray hair, but it's spotting assistance using DX clusters and that sort of stuff. But they also have they call it a boy and his radio category, where you don't use any outside tech or whatever. You just get on the radio and you tune the bands and you work guys that you find. There are a lot of categories, QRP and high and low power. Sometimes there's single modes, single bands that you can do. So you could go, if you really wanted to create a niche for yourself in a contest, you could go 15-meter single band, low power assisted. And so you're not competing with as many people. If you want wallpaper, it's kind of an easy way to get a nice certificate on the wall. And then the knockdown drag out stuff for these multi-op guys mostly, when you have these multi-transmitters, more than one transmitter on the air and so forth. For beginners. So the slow speed test is every Sunday evening. I think they have another one every week, but code speeds are limited to about 15 words a minute. And there's a tremendous amount of activity. I got on a couple of weeks ago. I don't make it for that one too often, but I got on and I got an email afterwards. This guy says, "You were my very first contact ever." So it feels good. And medium speed contest, it's kind of interesting. Medium speed is 20 words per minute, 20 or 25 words per minute, which is really kind of fast. That's on Monday morning, and I think there's one on Friday afternoon, an MST now on Fridays. The CWT is really fast. I'm doing about 32 words a minute, something like that, and I'm one of the slower guys. I could go faster, but I go 32 words a minute. And mainly because I can't send by hand much faster than 32. They're almost all these contests are on the weekends. There are a couple of short ones, these mini tests, like the slow speed test we just talked about. Those are an hour in length. There's one that's on Thursday night. Talk about being esoteric. There's a contest on Thursday nights at 9:30 Central Time. and it's called the sprint, and it goes from 9:30 to 10. And so if I call CQ and somebody answers me and I log him, we exchange our information. After we work, I have to move a kilohertz before I work someone else. And then he gets my frequency to call CQ, and it's a round robin. So you can't stay on a frequency for more than 2 contacts. So if I answer a CQ, I work the guy, then I can call CQ, then I can, and the crazy thing in that is there are people who make 60 contacts in 30 minutes on CW with that. Code speeds are really high, 35, 40 to 40 words a minute. And it's the same guys on every week, because there's so few guys that can do it. So if you hear 2 letters of a call sign, you kind of know who that guy, it's predictable. Here's some online contesting resources. I'm going to put together a short blurb for the newsletter that you guys can, that will give folks some of this information. But DFW Contest Group is a local contesting club, no dues, no meetings. They get together for dinner once a month in Allen. And so it's a group that encourages contesting, encourages teaching people about contesting and so forth. Of course, the ARRL has plenty of information available. Contesting.com is another. It's an online kind of message board for contesters. It's also, there's a lot of whining and complaining that goes on, but so be it. National Contest Journal is an ARRL publication. If you get QST, you can get NCJ for free, and it has not only a lot of interesting, not only contesting articles, but there's a lot of technical articles that are interesting for your station, like antenna switching systems and that kind of stuff that people do. And Field Day, that's my favorite of the year. It's actually, I think I got hooked young in Field Day, but one experience in particular, I was on 6 meters, and this was in around 1981. I think I was just out of high school, did Field Day with some friends in Houston, and we had a 6-meter antenna, but we were doing Field Day high power. You're not supposed, it's not that you're not supposed to do it, it's really not in the spirit, but you can claim in your category that you're high power, you just get fewer points in the contest. But afterwards, I got 2 SWL cards one from Portugal and one from Spain on 6 meters, and I just thought, that is cool. Rookie Roundup's another one the ARRL does for beginners. If you haven't had your license very long, that's what that one's for. They do a RIDI one, they do a sideband one, and a CW one every year. The state QSO parties, there's a state QSO party challenge that's going on. It's extremely popular. The Lake amateur radio guys are very involved in that. But it's there are more than one QSO party every weekend. I think sometimes there's maybe 4 in a weekend. Yeah, so there's lots of activities and so forth. And if you have a small station, or QRP or whatever, those guys will hear you a lot of times too, just because they're banging away looking for contacts. And my ADD's kicking in for a second, so I have to share something with Kevin. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Hermes Light 2.
Yeah.
So I bought one.
Oh, did you?
So I wanted an SDR. There's a SDR transceiver that's out there. It's pretty good. It's QRP, but it's like $350. And it's a maker project, so it's all open source. And these guys took a cable modem and they added a RF section on it, and that's the radio. And so $350. It's called the Hermes Light 2. And I mention that because I've been using it on Sunday afternoons when the state QSO parties are going on. I know those guys are going to hear my 7 watts. These guys will be loud and so forth, and I can. The contests, they give out trophies. Salmon Run, they actually will ship you salmon, fresh salmon from Washington State. The California QSO party, the winners get bottled wine. It's bottled wine, and your name and call sign and stuff is engraved in the bottle. It's kind of nice. You get bragging rights with your buddies, especially if you find someone with a similar station you can compete with. So this is an example of that. So this guy had never done a contest before. He had been through CW Academy, and he'd gone through a couple of levels of CW Academy. So the very first time he gets on the air, he decides to go single op, low power, 20 meters, very small category. The guy comes in first place in Texas, and he gets a certificate. And I told him, I said, this doesn't happen every time. It's not gonna happen every time. But he was very excited. It motivated him to do a bunch of other stuff. Again, DFW contest group, they're there also if you have questions about learning that, and learning more about contest and being involved with them. And I have a sign-up sheet here. Sometime tonight, if you're interested, I will do a class of one. It's actually can be very effective, but I could probably handle 6 or 8 people in a class. If anybody wants to sign up for the first level, I will. I'd be happy to teach it, and it lasts 8 weeks. There's 2 sessions a week, but I have modified it before. Sometimes people don't have time for 2 a week, so I've modified it before where we do 1, and we use Zoom. And one of the things you need time every day to practice. Ideally, it's an hour a day. The closer you can get to an hour a day, the better your success rate is going to be. And the first 4 classes are pretty simple. The hurdle starts at class 5, and then you start learning what I call the letters that suck. And the letters that suck are the ones that are 4 symbols. They're the ones that have 4 pieces to them. And then the regression starts. And so people really hate life in sessions 7, 8, and 9. And then magically they wake up one day and the angels are singing, and they've conquered Morse code by the 10th lesson. There's no new letters or symbols or punctuation to learn. And so that's my presentation. I don't think that's mine.
That's not you.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you very much.
Any questions in the room?
Yeah, what's, after the first, I don't know, do you do these levels by words per minute, or like what would somebody expect after the first session?
So they have a unique teaching method. Because of the success rate, they've kind of locked in on it because it works. And so the characters in CW Academy, the characters are always sent between 23 and 25 words per minute, the character itself. But we use a lot of spacing. They call that Farnsworth, named after some British guy. And so the effective speed is about 5 words per minute. And so when you get out of the first level, your code speed's going to effectively be probably 5 to 7 words a minute, maybe a little bit higher. The oldest person in my class was Ken Rainey. Is that his last name? He was 79, I think, when he was in my class. He's a teacher now. He teaches in CW Academy. He's taught in CW Academy. Not only is he a teacher, but he wrote the latest curriculum in CW Academy. And so,
It's good to keep your brain.
good mental gymnastics. Yes, it is. It gets the neurons together, rolling together. But so the outcome of the first class is somewhere in the neighborhood of about 7 words per minute or so. So the second level focuses on something called instant character recognition, and we kind of work on that even from the beginning. So think of it like this: if I send "da," how long in your brain do you have to compute until you come back and say that's A? And so we try to tighten that down. We want your recall of that character to be as instantaneous as possible.
It helps if you can spell too.
If you what?
If you can spell.
Yeah, well, so I operate all the time. There's a lot of really bad spellers. I'm one of them, but it's funny though once you learn CW, like I talked to a guy one day. We were talking about genealogy on CW. Well, that's a lot of letters in the conversation, but once you attain that proficiency, that level of proficiency, you do it and you don't really think about it. It's no sweat. You just get on and you do it. So the second level really focuses on instant character recognition, and they want to get you up to, at a minimum, 10 words per minute. The third one is really where the rubber meets the road, because when you're done with that, you're going to be up at around 15 words per minute code speed. And then the last level narrows the gap from 15 to about mid-20s. And because your recognition, your recall of a letter that's sent and recognizing what that is, improves, getting from that 15, 16, 17 word per minute speed up to about 25, it comes pretty naturally. Just comes right along. So for a lot of folks, it's about a year progress. And certainly within a year, you could get from not having any code experience to about 15 words per minute or so. And at 15 words per minute, you can get on the air and have a lot of fun. Like, you can work a lot of POTA guys. You can work a lot of SOTA, the Summit guys as well, a lot of QSO party people. So one thing about CW contacts is there's predictability, because you always know it's going to be RST name and state, or RST state and name. RST is the signal report, and it's a 3-digit code. So you know when RST's coming, oh, listen up, you're about to get 3 numbers. When their name comes up, it's amazing how many hams are named Bill, Bob, or Rob. I mean, I had a friend who changed his name on the air to Ed because it was simple to send. He just, ED, just done with it. And so, I focus on, focus on the things that you would recognize. That some people focus on recognizing the 100 most popular words in the lexicon and in the language, but I don't do that because you don't run into that. So we're simple-celled creatures in ham radio. We talk about RST, name, and QTH, and then we talk about our radio and antenna and the weather. And if you're going pretty slow on CW, by the time that happens, you're done talking. You just don't want to say much more. Of course, you can go on and on with folks too. So I use a paddle. I use a keyer. So you can use bugs. That was the predecessor to electronic keying. Straight keys, of course, are out there. But when you're going 25 words a minute, if you're chit-chatting at 25 words a minute, it's really hard using a straight key. And it's hard using a straight key and sending well for a long period of time. And so I have a Bengali Pearl, it's called. Bengali's an Italian key maker, and I would never buy one for myself, but my kids bought me one for Father's Day a couple years ago. And I have a Vibraplex iambic paddle that I use. My daughter bought that for me once, and then I have a Kent iambic paddle that I use. I've used Benchers. They're great. Bencher paddles are good. Brown Brothers, for any of the guys may remember a paddle called the Brown Brothers. It was made a guy had a machine shop in his basement in St. Louis. And I loved it. When I was a kid, you could pay him in postage stamps for the paddle. And it was $15. Now they're like $50 or $60. Collectors, collectors are getting them.
Well, thank you, Eric.